Iris Manzanares, and she presented her papers in Singapore in December last year. She's moved between business and academia. She's been head of international relations for the Société des Amis of the National Museum of Modern Art in France, and moved to Southeast Asia 2015. She's a lawyer from University of Costa Rica and holds a master's degree from the European Political and Administrative Studies from the College of Europe in Bruges, Belgium. Costa Rica has, as we all know, much in common with Singapore. I mean, both are small, but with very large footprints in the global scene. In the international arena, both, in a sense, punch above their weight, and they do so very effectively. In a somewhat unstable part of the world, I mean, Costa Rica has been known to be a very stable democracy. Some of us have been following the politics of Costa Rica with some interest now. They're about to have the runoff elections, I think.
The second round.
Second round, but what is more interesting is the factors that have gone into political decisions of the electorate to cast their votes in Costa Rica. But it has a highly educated workforce, and I understand I mean, they're also intensely English-speaking, the workforce.
Yes,
yes. That is one difference with the neighboring countries. It has performed admirably in Human Development Index, which is one of the highest in Latin America, with remarkable progressive environmental policies. This is not to say, of course, that there are no challenges. The infrastructures call for attention, and there is a greater need to attract the received wisdom is international investment. Reducing foreign debt is also a challenge and a priority. And of course, in this regard, the International Monetary Fund have proffered some suggestions. But where Costa Rica takes the cake, I think, is its role in global diplomacy. If my memory serves me right, I think during our career, Costa Rica has been in the Security Council in the United Nations at least on 3 occasions.
Indeed.
3 occasions it has served on the Security Council. One of his former presidents, Oscar Arias, many of us have heard of him, Nobel Peace Laureate, extremely well regarded in not just Latin American, but in the global political scene. I have worked very closely with some of my Costa Rican colleagues, and I cannot do an event on Costa Rica without a mention of Bruno Stanio, who was my peer in Costa Rica. And Bruno was foreign minister, excelled in academia in Princeton and Sorbonne, I think, and thereafter as an activist in human rights. But I shan't be stealing your thunder, Ambassador. I will give the floor now to you for roughly 30-40 minutes, and then we will have a Q&A session.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this invitation. I feel extremely honored, and also very touched to be here. I have my heart, when I visited South Asia, I spent a few months in India 20 years ago, and it had a real life impact in my experience. So I hope I will be able to say things of interest in the region. I was also in Dhaka, as I was mentioning before. I haven't had the pleasure to go to Pakistan or Sri Lanka or other countries from South Asia, but they're definitely on my list, and I hope I will learn a lot from you today. I told the Minister and Ambassador not to say all these beautiful things, because really you have covered so many points. So I'm very touched that you know my country quite well. And I actually moved to New York when Bruno Stanio was our permanent representative there, and indeed an amazing ambassador. So in recent years, as part of our new global perspective, we have turned eyes towards Asia, like the rest of the world has done, gradually increasing our presence in the region. So in addition to the traditional presence that we had in North Asia, with Japan and Korea being two very strong supporters and friends of Costa Rica, we open our mission in China. It's going to be 11 years this year, in Singapore, in India, and in Qatar. And most recently, we opened our embassy in United Arab Emirates and Indonesia. That for the time being is, we're having a chargé d'affaires, but it's with a view to obviously grow into a fully fledged embassy. For a small country like Costa Rica, I mean, of course, we don't talk about size, but when you're in Singapore, you can never use that again, saying that you're a small country. But we are a small country in all things compared with the rest of the world. This represents a huge step for us. So our embassies are obviously small. We're 3 people here. But it certainly shows our, our awareness, obviously, and welcoming of the fact that it's the most dynamic, Asia-Pacific is the most dynamic and fastest growing region in the world. And only by having an active physical presence here, we would then be able to have a more balanced and pragmatic global approach to international affairs. So we are concerned and proactive to be able to keep ourselves as up to speed as possible to be part and engage in the global arena so we can remain relevant and have the right approach. In addition to our mutual interests and multilateral issues that we all share, including climate change, human rights, disarmament, and rule of law, which I will touch upon all of these, we are convinced that we can gradually build a platform for enhanced trade, cooperation, investment, through the exploration of stronger ties, whether this be in education. We have been very actively, although we're referring to South Asia, but we've been very active in conversations with Singapore, with NUS, and we really see education. We dedicate around between 7.1 and 8% of our GDP in education, which for a country like ours is a pretty high number. And in that aspect, we always see that as a dialogue. So obviously we would welcome to be able to have Costa Ricans going to your countries to study, and also welcoming South Asian citizens and Asian citizens to come to Costa Rica. We have already those channels, but we are obviously very keen in enriching this. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs, in order to celebrate our 200 years of independence from Spain, we are have an initiative. We are 2021. It's called to have 200 scholarships around the world as a sort of link of how to remain open and influenced in a positive sense by other countries' ideas. So we, during the last decade, our country has seen a consistent growth in receiving foreign direct investment. So FDI inflows have grown an average of 5%. Every year since 2006. Multinational companies that are established in Costa Rica are doing very well. They're happy. These numbers are growing. And we have almost 300 high-tech companies, 24% of the Fortune 100 companies that are established. And these numbers are, as I said, increasing. They take advantage in Costa Rica that we are the #1 exporter of high value-added services, and also leading in productions process sophistication in the region. And together with Chile, and I'm very happy to have my fellow ambassador and friend here with me, we are leading in innovation in our region. We are #1 expert, for example, and this some people don't think, but the #1 expert of Costa Rica are medical devices. So we're very much working in life sciences, and we work like in valves for the heart. And this is what Ambassador was referring to, the highly sophisticated labor in Costa Rica. This is what we kind of feel very proud of. our privileged location, we really like to think of ourselves like Singapore does. Singapore feels like the door of Southeast Asia. We feel ourselves also as the link with the Americas. We're in the waist of the Americas, so we're right there in that little part, uniting the North and the South, and we have the Caribbean and the Pacific. And although we're very far away from all your countries, I think when you look at the globe, it does come clear that it's like an equilibrium. We're in both sort of sides of the world, and we share a lot of interests and a lot of vulnerability from an environment point of view, and thus a lot of points that connect us. It's also worth mentioning that APM Terminals has invested $1 billion in a new port that will be opening in 2 years. And we hope, or we trust, that port should be the most performing we hope to be one of the most performing, now that I have a fellow colleague from Latin America, ports in the region. And this should also be an opportunity for creating more networks in Asia Pacific. So Costa Rica has also gone a long way as a nation devoted to disarmament, human rights protection, and respect of international law. And this has been very helpful in creating a positive climate for investment and exchange. We have experienced 6 continuous decades of peace, and a country we were first primary exporter of agricultural products. When I grew up in Costa Rica, and now this is going to make me sound very old, but I grew up when we had like 4 or 5 products. We were really depending on the export of bananas and coffee. We still have what is reputed as the best coffee in the world, the best grain, the best Arabica. But we have now around 4,300 products of export. So we have really diversified our chain. And we have become, as I said, a positive platform to attract destinations for investment in high goods. We believe, obviously, in a holistic approach to development, knowing that sustainability should be built on 3 pillars. So we believe in economic, social, and environmental. Our societies require production of wealth, reduction of inequalities, and this is, as much as we defend and work very hard on human rights, we in our country also have to work hard into, it's an everyday effort that we make to have also inequality. Costa Rica is a very open country to immigration. The hardcore of our immigration policy is based on the respect of human rights. And when I was doing my training last July on consular matters, I was really touched and impressed by the openness and the kindness of the system. Now, this doesn't mean that it doesn't have flaws in the practice, but it is indeed the human rights are at the hardcore of the system in order to welcome the people, and the policies are made in order to try to be as inclusive with those people who join and come to work in Costa Rica. So we're also reputed for our laws when it comes to the workforce in Costa Rica. So furthermore, from our perspective on development and sustainability, we put the human being at the center of our policy. And inequality is one of the main world issues, whether a country is rich or poor. This is something that we all have to think and really play thought when we're building our exchanges and when we're building our policies. We believe the United Nations system and other relevant institutions must work together to establish more complex yet transparent and fair mechanisms that better reflect our middle-income countries' diverse realities and challenges by defining a system-wide guidelines and criteria. So the sustainable, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals is obviously something that is at the heart of our system. As Ambassador was mentioning, for us, the international arena and the instruments that are out there is for us a platform that not only we embrace, but that we try to be as active as possible. And obviously this these institutions could be much better, and but we believe that only by being active and being involved we can improve them. So this agenda obviously recognizes that nobody should be left behind, and that's why we also seize every diplomatic and political forum as an opportunity to make that point and to sort of keep this in the scope of trade and any other sort of exchange. So the development agenda is also closely linked to the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework for Disasters Risk Reduction. The benefits in one area obviously benefit the other area. We believe the Paris Agreement is a historical success in harnessing much needed global cooperation. Costa Rican Cristiana Figueres, I don't know if all of you know that the UN Executive Secretary for the Climate Change Convention that led to the Paris Agreement is a Costa Rican, Cristiana Figueres, and we feel very proud. We're very proud of her for who she is and for her amazing, outstanding job and beliefs. She is the daughter of a man who is seen in Costa Rica as our Lee Kuan Yew, in a way. You'll hear some of his accomplishments as well. So she achieved, for this milestone with what she calls a stubborn optimism. And I join humbly her front, because I really believe we have to be stubborn optimists, especially when we're dealing with the challenges we have nowadays. And it is, I think, in order to face climate change, we need a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of stubbornness, and a lot of optimism. And I feel here in the region, sometimes it can feel, right, when we're talking about this topic, it can feel very depressing, but I really think, like everything, this opens a lot of opportunities. And I think some countries that might be, in some issues, lagging a bit behind, they can do a leap and all of a sudden embrace environmentally friendly technologies, saving themselves quite a lot of hassles and being a step ahead. So I really think that this is an opportunity. It is a challenge. There are challenging times, but I think it brings a lot of opportunities to try to do things differently and also differentiate oneself in the arena with an ethical and environmentally friendly approach also in the industry. Our experience has demonstrated that the argument that environmental protection and emission cuts harms economic growth or development is a myth. We like to see it that way. Our decision to go renewable was in no way improvised. We're not going to pretend that it's something easy that you do from one day to another either. But it was our country's determination since its inception as a republic in 1848 to craft a political system profoundly committed to ensuring the common good through public education, sound public policies, good public strategic services, and solid development. And you know, the decision that was made in 1948 to abolish our army really set up the platform to envisage this sort of challenges or opportunities that can be seen as impossible, but that with certain steps, all of a sudden they become much more reachable. And that is what explains how come we're able to invest so much in education. It was a decision. What we could have invested in weapons, we started investing it in education. Now, I'm obviously not naive, and I don't think this is something that countries can easily obtain. I am aware that the realities are different and the sizes of your countries are obviously very different, and your recent past is also very particular. So I'm not pretending that the peace approach of Costa Rica is something you can easily accept. But I do think it is interesting because many people say, well, how do you defend yourself without an army? And I said, well, would you attack a country without an army? You might attack a country that has an army similar to yours, but maybe you will not attack a country that does not have an army. And a country that does not have an army, it is obliged to use dialogue to communicate, because you cannot just hit. you have to make yourself credible, and then you have to dialogue, and you have to make yourself worth in different platform. So it is a big responsibility because we also have to always work hard to be legitimate, which is not always the case, and we also flaw, but it is another type of dialogue that we're proposing, and we like to believe that we have a role to try to show this other different way. This, I think, could also be the moment maybe to talk. I'm just going to skip a little bit the order. To talk of the role we had in we believe also in multilateral disarmament as a hardcore of our foreign policy. And on July the 7th, during the UN conference to negotiate a building instrument prohibiting nuclear weapons, Ambassador Elaine White, the colleague, the permanent representative of Costa Rica to the United Nations in Geneva, gave the final blow for the adoption of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So the road to nuclear arms prohibition started on July 16, 1945, when the first test of an atomic bomb took place. And the treaty arises as a consequence, we believe, of two realities. On one hand, the frustration of a large part of the international community over the stagnation of nuclear disarmament negotiations over the last decades. And on the other, growing concern about the humanitarian effects of nuclear detonation. And as you all know, the treaty leaves the door open for states possessing nuclear weapons to be part of the treaty. And the text also has provisions on victim assistance and environmental remediation. Then I get that sort of topic out of my presentation, which we can, of course, obviously discuss afterwards. We have, as you might know, 51,100 square kilometers, and we embrace around it. The numbers change a little bit. It's between 4 and 5% of the world biodiversity. In 0,0, again, between 1 and 3, depending on which information you're looking of the land. And this brings me also, again, back to the environmental topic. Hydroelectric power is our main source of energy supply. And recently, Costa Rica, a few months ago, made a little bit the international news for the fact that in 2 consecutive years, more than 98% of electricity production came from renewable sources. We were also able to revert deforestation and protect 25% of our inlands, 17% of our territorial sea, under some kind of either public or private environmental protection regime. In 1987, the forest covered was 30% of the land, while in 2005 it represented 51.4% of the territory. So I share these examples as maybe as a way of showing reversing the environmental damage we can cause is not only possible, but it's exciting, and it's also a way that Costa Rica cooperates with other countries. So I'll be very happy if one of your countries would like to dialogue more with Costa Rica and maybe find ways that we could have our people share our views, our experiences, and we can have a dialogue about how you are embracing your challenges and find ways to tackle these. We, as Ambassador had mentioned, we have also attained and sustained the high human development category in the Human Development Index. From 1998 to 2011, the country has managed to reduce a total of 139 millions of tons of carbon dioxide. And we did this through our policies, but also through an investment of $1.2 million US, which for us obviously is allotted. Maybe not for Singapore. But. Costa Rica presented an ambitious commitment in Paris, which maintains our early and visionary pledge to become carbon neutral by 2021, incorporating also a reduction of 25% of emissions by 2030, and by introducing the concept of deep decarbonizing of the economy, which implies the need for significant reductions of emissions until reaching zero, we hope, by 2085. Other relevant elements of our national determined contributions are the components of adaptation and considerations of equality and commitment to human rights and the equality of gender. This has been an aspect that Costa Rica has really been promoting at the hardcore of the environmental debate as well. We also made a commitment to become a laboratory for the decarbonizing process worldwide. So in Costa Rica, we're working on becoming or going towards what we're calling the Green Hub. And it is an initiative to operate at the country scale as a sort of laboratory for the decarbonizing of the economy. We're generating, or the idea is to generate an ecosystem of innovation to pilot hard and soft technologies that are required in a new low emission economy. And we want to operate this sort of laboratory in order to implement projects, institutional arrangements, and new technologies, which would work as prototypes. And the successful prototypes would then be scaled up in other countries and regions. And Asia being such a leading force in technology and innovation, the purpose of sharing these plans and what we're working on is to see if we could find ways of ideas that you could have, or ways that we could replicate, or that we could embrace, so we could work on this aspect together as well. So we see the knowledge sharing as part of this Green Hub, and have started doing so in areas where Costa Rica has been successful, such as conservation and management of ecosystems. For example, in the forest management, we established what we call the payment for environmental services. And this policy was the first launched in the world in this respect, and has been a model that has inspired other countries, even countries that we don't have maybe such close ties, like Burkina Faso or the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the idea is to not only incentivize Costa Ricans, in our case, or people who live in Costa Rica, to protect the forest, but we provide funding in that process to really encourage. And you see people buying pieces of land with forest and protecting it instead of destroying it, because then all of a sudden it becomes much more interesting. And then we have also provided cooperation in helping other countries establish forestry carbon credits sale mechanism. So the idea of the fact that you are protecting your nature, you can sell, carbon credits. And this has been also an interesting way about how to make it more interesting, basically. So, as I was saying, Costa Rica is in the process also of integrating the Sustainable Development Goals into our national planning process. We obviously, like you all agree, we believe in the engagement of all sectors of society in order to achieve this. So we launched a National Sustainable Development Goals Pact. So maybe going a little bit about the political system. So the three branches of government, the civil society, the local governments, academia, and the private sector are committing to implement these. So another important aspect that we find in the Sustainable Development Goals that we all share is the commitment to support small-scale and family farming and food production. Costa Rica recognizes that nearly 80% of the extreme poor live in rural areas and work in agriculture. Nearly 795 million people throughout the world still suffer from hunger. And family farms seem to be a key to address these interlinked obstacles, since they produce more than 80% of the world's food in value terms. So to strengthen the international commitment that it inspired by the success of the International Year of Family Farming that was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2014, last October, Costa Rica launched the initiative supported by 13 other countries to declare a decade of family farming within the UN system. And this was officially adopted in December. So the decade of family farming from 2019 to 2028 was so strongly supported that I believe this is a point that all countries, no matter how different they are in their developments, share the view of the importance.
Costa Rican resolution?
Costa Rica was leading it, yes.
Leading it.
Leading it at that, and it was adopted by the United Nations on December 20th. So this decade aims to serve as a framework to promote better public policies and offers a unique opportunity to contribute to end hunger and poverty, as well as to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So this we see it as a way to reduce inequality and to ensure the economic empowerment of women and to combat climate change. Because it is very interesting when you see through all these initiatives how obviously everything is interrelated. When you have 50% of women producing, 50% of the food being produced by women. So you see this woman working and the families and the whole connection of the cycle. So obviously if we are embracing this and honoring it and protecting the climate so we can continue to produce this, then we're achieving the goals of well-being worldwide. So this brings me again to some of the main pillars include the end of all forms of discrimination against women and girls in rural areas. Now this is a key worldwide topic, and here in Singapore, the month of March, I mean, being a woman ambassador, I never knew was going to bring me so many opportunities. From meeting the EU Trade Commissioner when we had our power woman lunch of 23 ladies, but also it really is a reminder about the importance of if you integrate women in trade, it is of interest to the country. I mean, it brings back to the country, and if we educate women who are the mothers of our sons as well, then our sons will be better educated. So in Costa Rica we have a ministry for women for also taking care. Costa Rica, like many countries, also has violence towards women and these challenging issues that South Asia also has at the hardcore of their issues to tackle. We believe multilateral action is the most enduring way to achieve sustainability. I think that has been said quite a lot in this speech, so I guess you all agree that is clear. So we believe very much in these international networks. We must also carry out truly effective actions of inclusive development, and these are also of political nature. They are political because they entail a ground change in policy in order for us to really effectively be able to address the basic needs of the most vulnerable. So these policies imply universal access to high-quality education and real access to means that may enable entrepreneurship and adequate job access. The purpose of opening these embassies, of participating in important conferences like this one today, is obviously to build bridges. And the main purpose of my role as a new ambassador here is to find ways of collaborating. So with Asia, obviously the economical aspect is of very interest because of the growth you're having. But I took great part of my presentation today to also talk all those challenges that, challenges are many, but opportunities are infinite. And we are, we would like to be considered as a country, although we're small, very, very enthusiastic with stubborn optimism, and would be happy to embrace challenges together and listen to your good practices so we can also learn and try to embrace them in Costa Rica. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for that excellent expose of the many facets of the Costa Rican experience that I certainly do, and I'm sure many of all my colleagues do find very interesting. And your final thesis that Costa Rica, like many of us, have faced so many challenges. The challenges are many and the opportunities are infinite is really a very profound statement. We've seen a country in a milieu where you spoke of the abolition of the army in 1948, and thereafter all of us know that in the 50s and 60s, Latin America was heavily military dominated in many ways. So in many ways, Costa Rica was an island was a Pacific island, not in terms of the ocean, but in terms of peace, and which has contributed tremendously and in a very marked way. I had spent some time in Latin America. I was ambassador to Chile. I was ambassador to Peru as well. And so I was able to view Costa Rica in many ways and other Central American countries with some close proximity. But thank you. Your analysis was terrific. What I'll do now is open the floor for questions and answer, and I'll recognize Dr. Dipinder Singh. I would also encourage you to sort of identify yourself and your affiliation for our records. Dipinder.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Dipinder. I'm with the Institute here. I used to teach a course in development economics, and aside from the usual stories about China and India and the growth of Japan, Germany, I'll be looking for interesting stories or examples from where you could learn a lot. And one of the most interesting, if not the most extraordinary example, has been of Costa Rica. Right from 1948, as you mentioned, the abolition of the army, to implementing what's a carbon tax long before the world even started talking about it, to huge investments in education where you have a very well-trained workforce, the gender parity in a region which is not. And Costa Rica is plumb in the middle of a region which has a very violent history. You've got the Sandinistas just north. Guatemala's got a very disturbing history, and so does northern part of Latin America and other places. We've also read about, heard so much about President Oscar Arias Sanchez. My question is, what is it that over the decades has sustained the social compact across different governments, across different socioeconomic groups, that's made Costa Rica that oasis of stability that exists today? And this is a compact that cuts across political parties, it seems. It's almost too good to be true from outside.
Well, we obviously have challenges, and I realized when I finished my speech that this only talks about the good things, and we obviously have a lot of challenges.
I did mention
so
challenges.
I will, exactly, and I'm happy to mention those as well, because we are struggling in many fronts. But it is true that I even myself, it is really the idiosyncrasy, is that the word you say in English? The idiosyncrasy of our country. The behavior of Costa Ricans is very much like that. And I realize myself, the attitude I have sometimes in countries that are so different. And I have to kind of realize we sort of grow up feeling very free and very relaxed at the same time. And I think it can be explained already from our history, even the way we got independence. So Costa Rica, when the Spanish came, I still remember when we were 2 million citizens. So we had a very low population, a very, very rich nature. So I was reading today, I think in the 1790s, we were considered the most poor, sort of from all the Spanish region, like the poorest, because there was basically no material richness. It was really the nature. And the way we received our independence, the news sort of arrived. So we didn't have to fight for independence. We sort of received the news that we had received independence from Spain, but we sort of belonged to the Mexican Empire, but in a way it was too far away to have contact. So then we were part of the Central American, and then we sort of got an independence from them. So already the independence started in a way where we say, when the clouds clear off, we will know. So already the beginning of the story is already part of the idiosyncrasy of Costa Rica. We do not have since the beginning the clash of races that you have in other areas of Latin America. So you don't have 30% of white dominating 70% of Aboriginal Americans or Native Americans. So already we didn't have that challenge, because it is a challenge, obviously. So we're a bit of a mixed society. And we did not have the latifundios. We didn't have the big properties of coffee plantations, again, with the white having its big coffee plantation using the others. So Costa Rica, the way we established the production of coffee, for example, was small parcels of land with owners. So in Costa Rica, at the time when I grew up, because I think that there is a bigger divide nowadays all over the world, and also in Costa Rica. But I remember, being poor in Costa Rica meant you had your little piece of land, your chickens, your cow, your boy with a very perfectly ironed shirt, barefoot walking to school, 5 blocks in even a house on earth. But they owned their land and they owned their little piece of production. And so this also
have undocumented land in Costa Rica,
No,
which is
no,
a
no.
big problem in lower down in Latin America.
Yes,
right?
no. For example, the rule of law. It's another again. So basically, we had the revolution that led to the abolishment of the army. What was interesting was that after the revolution, it was when the army was abolished. When often people, what they do is that they reinforce the army in order to stay in power. And I think in that case, it was very smart of Pepe Figueres to abolish the army, because then that's a way you're not kicked out of power. Because again, you can see it from both ways. I make the army very strong so they don't take me out of power, but then what if the army changes their mind and then they kick you? So I think I'm really simplifying a little bit here, but it was a wise move in that case. So the fact that we don't have the struggle, we don't have a religious struggle either. We are a Christian-based. We used to be all Catholics. Now we have also a percentage of Christians, but again, coming from the same source. So we don't have a religious challenge. We don't have a racial clash, and the policies that were taken since the beginning of making the land. So then immediately we had very visionary statement as well. When we abolished the army, that money went into education, went into a very health system that's very strong. This is one of our strongest, I think, systems. We were really inspired at the time a lot from Europe. We had a lot of influence from the European perspective when it came to education at the time, from France, and the health system also. And this sort of a strong structures, which are also struggling now, and now you have more private hospitals opening as well, etc. But this is something, the medical aspect, the health aspect in Costa Rica is very strong, and we have citizens from the United States of America coming to Costa Rica on medical tourism because it is cheaper. It is not cheap, but it's certainly much cheaper than the United States coming over. So it's sort of like we created that ambience where the higher classes would study in American schools, go to the United States to do their masters and their things, but they would always come back to Costa Rica because of that sort of idiosyncrasy. We also have an amazing weather. We have like between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius in the capital, all year long, surrounded by mountains. So the nature is just so beautiful that I think people have a real well-being. We have one region of our world where it's part of the blue zone in Guanacaste, so the people live more than 100 years. So we're together with Japan and other areas in the world where people live the longest. And we know a little bit the cliche of the happiest countries. We have gone down on the ladder there. We used to be the #1 for several times, and now we're, I don't know, with Denmark and Singapore, and in others they say we're #5. But all this goes really very much on the mentality of Costa Ricans being a little bit laid back and growing up in that. Does that reply a little bit to your question? Maybe I went a bit vague, but.
No, it does, but are there any, they always haves and have-nots, I mean, the French element, how does...
Yes, and also, of course, and also important, the rule of law. I mean, Costa Rica, it's almost too much the rule of law. I mean, for example, we're having our second round of elections on the Sunday of Easter, and we cannot have it on another day because we would have to modify the Constitution, and we don't have enough time because what is established. So it is really, when you don't have an army, it leads to that decision, and the wise decisions at the beginning leads to a very strong legal framework that is very, very cherished by everyone. And so you have kind of like legal soldiers there that give stability. So then nobody is really stronger than law, and this is a real case. In Costa Rica, it's not because you're the daughter or the son of the president, or even because you're the president, and you have a lot of funny anecdotes of the vice minister not getting on the plane because he didn't have the passport with him with the vaccination that he needed to go to that country. So he said, well, I'll have a conference call the meeting, because things like that I find are quite funny, because I almost feel like, he has the passport, he showed it in the previous flight, he should be able to get in the airplane. This Costa Rica, he just couldn't get in the airplane, and we'll do the conference call because he's not going to run and take another plane. So, yes, I think it's really part of the system. We're all very proud also of that aspect of peace. This is really, I think, although Costa Ricans might not be very worried about a lot, they're very, very proud of this peace aspect. This is really at the hardcore of their pride. So I really think we excel in international arena because of this. So I think people have really appropriated that. So anybody who would try to attack that would not have any sort of attraction. It would basically be totally, it's impossible to be popular in Costa Rica by trying to attack that. You can attack many things, but not that. And of course, we do have, let's make it very clear, we do have issues, and we do have social inequality, and we do have a high level of immigration of people who come, and there is a challenge, you know, because obviously the level of education or conditions or of acceptance might not be the same. We also have issues with drug. You know, the drug trafficking was passing through Costa Rica. So there are levels, you know, this is starting to permeate because, of course, if you don't have a very strong military, you're all more vulnerable as well. So these are realities and issues we're facing. The security aspect of Costa Rica is also an issue. And with all this political opening up and elections, it is clear that security is an aspect that has to be strengthened, because the balance between human rights and security and the free liberties and all this balance is not always easy. So we do have challenges. Let me reassure you, we do have also inequality, and we do have more vulnerable versus people who are getting more rich, and this division is happening, and that's why it's also hardcore of my speech. This is not preaching to others about, you know, become like Costa Rica, not at all. This is, we all have to watch it because we don't want to leave people behind, and this is really part of our debate and our political debate, and the fact that we don't have now anymore the classical two parties rule. You know, we have new parties coming on, and people have looking at things from a different perspective, and there is a real debate in Costa Rica at the moment as we speak. But it's true, whether it is one person or another, the two from two new parties, one thing is clear, is we're always going to embrace these classical values I mentioned today. They're always going to be embraced by any politician that has really just the minimum desire of being elected.
What you just said, this new debate that you're experiencing in Costa Rica. I mean, whereas you see, you have emphasized. I mean, Costa Rica, one emphasizes the rule of law domestically. Is it ironical that the lead candidate in the elections is campaigning to against a judgment of an international court? I mean, the history behind it is, you see, the Latin American court has decreed that same-sex marriage be allowed in Costa Rica. It isn't. So the majority this thing is against that judgment. So these are interesting debates that are now taking place. You wouldn't attribute it to a sort of burgeoning religiosity in Costa Rica necessarily?
No, Costa Rica has always been very, very religious. Okay. So, you know, what we're called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cult, not for nothing, you know, really, it's part of the tradition, and the church has an important role in Latin America, I would say. It's really, we can say it all across. So we're very human rights, which goes online, but obviously when it comes to same-sex marriage, I think the issue that really worries in general when it comes to the Catholic world, it's when it comes to procreation and when it comes to children, because they obviously feel that by allowing same-sex marriage, you're getting closer to allowing abortion. I mean, very quickly everything is considered like if you're breaking that creation of life, you know, that sort of Adán Eva sacred moment is being. So it does become immediately extremely political, extremely sensitive, and an amazing card to go from 5% maybe to go really high on the numbers. I hope this is not being registered because it sounds terrible. So yes, the candidate that actually went from 5% to coming first in the first round, when this, in the 9th of January, the Inter-American Human Rights Court gave the response to the request that Costa Rica had made about this equality question. And they said yes, that they should gain the same rights. And now there you do have the country divided between those who believe that yes, they should absolutely have the same rights, and those who believe that it's great that we have homosexuals and it's great they're Costa Ricans and they're very liked and everything, but from there to be able to be officially married like the classical marriage, it's a bit too much. So you're finding that level. So all of a sudden at the beginning, the debate kind of broke into this issue, which of course is not the question per se, but it really took a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Now he softened down and he said that he wouldn't, because at the beginning it came out like we would walk out of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. So then you had it started again, as you were saying, a lot of editorials and a lot of saying we are human rights. It really became an issue. And he said immediately, very quickly, of course not. We wouldn't step down. We would just. So he noted his tone.
Okay. Yeah, Michelle.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the very positive presentation. So I was just thinking, since we are all in Singapore, probably perhaps you can discuss the Costa Rica and Singapore relations. Because I understand Singapore, Costa Rica signed a free trade agreement back in 2013. And so 5 years down the road, can you share with us on the developments of the Costa Rican business community in Singapore and the industries they are clustering in, of course, being aided to a certain extent by the FTA? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, we were very proud and happy signing the free trade agreement already 7 years. And part of my, I am the third ambassador here. So we are very excited with the relations with Singapore, and I believe that there's a lot of mutual respect. We feel very honored that Singapore sees us as a good partner. Now it's a moment when we have to start adding more meat to the bone, because that free trade agreement allows a lot of exchange. We have Singapore has been working in Costa Rica with containers and importing some coffee and wood and 42% of medical devices in the percentage of what they're importing. But the numbers are not, it's not, we definitely can improve a lot. I've met already twice with the Ministry of Trade, and we had the CEO of Procomer, who's the Institute for Promoting Trade, who came here a month ago. And the message we got is that it's very important for us to promote Costa Rica here. So I'm not going to hide that our businessmen in Costa Rica are in a very comfortable situation at the moment. They basically have an excellent relationship with the United States and with the European Union. They're in a very, very comfortable zone. So they're really, basically for them to sort of stretch out to Southeast Asia is far. And this works both ways. Singapore is doing excelling so well in everything, going all the way to Costa Rica feels far. So I think the respect is there, the appreciation is there. We need to make more promotion of who we are and what are the opportunities, and I'm exactly working on that. The Minister of Trade is coming the 9th, 10th, and 11th of April. And we are going to visit several. They have a very specific agenda regarding foreign direct investment to create sort of common links of investment. As I said, the port is opening. That leads to a lot of opportunities. And we believe when it comes to trade, if that's specific your question, when it comes to trade, we believe superfoods, I know this sounds like a small, but superfoods could be an area of interest. We're very good at producing those products. That's very much in. Fruits is a little bit tricky because of the distance, and also because all around Southeast Asia you're producing this. So I claim very proudly that our bananas are so much better, but you have like 10 varieties in the supermarket, and the amount would be tricky. But still, even bananas, we've spoken with So Fresh already to see they're interested in importing our bananas. But we believe products that can preserve a little bit better, like superfoods, could be an opening.
Good. Dr. Jivanta, shortly.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm a researcher here at the Institute. Out of curiosity, can you tell us about the extent of China's involvement in presence in Costa Rica? Are they involved in this port, for instance? And is there any anxiety yet in Costa Rica about this prospect?
I like the yet. Excellent. Well, we
for granted.
We opened exactly. I like that. had opened up our relations with China almost 11 years ago, as I mentioned. Like Dr. Oscar Arias Sanchez said, he was the one who opened the relations with China. He said this was not like, this was kind of as an obvious acknowledgement of the role that China plays in the world, as a sort of reality. So it is only normal that we had relations with China and joined the 100 and I don't know how many countries who were recognizing the policy of China as one. And that's when we ended our relations with Taiwan and opened up our relations with China. They're going well. We have a free trade agreement. We are exporting our pineapples. We're the #1 exporter in the world of pineapples, so we're already exporting to China. The relations are going well, but they're going at another pace. We have our neighbor, Panama. They have signed, I think, 23 agreements. So Costa Rica, from the eye of our neighbor, is seen as very slow. We're not signing all these agreements. Again, the idiosyncrasy of Costa Rica, the way we do things take time, things have to be done in a certain way. We have a lot of issues we respect. We have a certain way of doing business. And I think nobody puts us in a hurry or in a rush. Maybe this could be a way of saying it. They offered us a stadium. If I'm off the record, I think they should have had asked for a much more beautiful football stadium. I think I would have had asked for so they came and they built our football stadium, and the relations are really jolly and happy. But we're not anxious, and they are not investing everywhere yet. We're kind of like in a dialogue of studying ways.
Okay, young Mishra.
Yes. Okay. If I look from a South Asian point of view, the Latin America region is a region which I look up to, because in terms of human development, if you take South Asia probably stands towards sub-Saharan Africa. Just this month, Bangladesh exited LDC status, and in Latin America we have middle-income countries with relatively high HDI, and as you mentioned, the ideological foundations of Costa Rica, the fact that you don't have an army, I think that's probably linked to your commitment towards international law, human rights, and disarmament. And given the kind of state that Costa Rica is, I just want to know what are the major global concerns of your country at the moment. The other question that I want to ask is from someone from Latin America. Coming from Latin America, what's your view on the current neo-colonialism? Because I'm afraid that that you see, if you look at China has been exploiting countries around the world for resources. You look at Burma, the military regime there has sell teak, jade, and all that below the market price. Same thing has been happening in many countries in Africa, in Afghanistan, even in Pakistan as well. Look at what's happening in Balochistan, the resources. So how would Costa Rica protect itself from neo-colonialism? And another point in your speech, you mentioned about FDI growth. Is your main FDI growth coming from China? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So from the global concerns, I think they're very much in line what I expressed. Environment is a big topic for us because, as you all know, our countries are particularly vulnerable. And we believe that because we have credibility in that front, we believe that we have the obligation to then be positive and activists, because we have decided there are places where we might have petroleum, we would never touch our lands. I remember I grew up knowing that we had just lost a little golden frog. We used to have tiny little toads, golden, in Costa Rica, and they are extinct. That's it. We're never going to get them back. And these are things that touch Costa Rica. So the idea that our forests are we just had a very hard fight with legal discussion at The Hague with Nicaragua, because we had some problems with the frontier. $5 million it costed our country to defend our land and defend trees that they were tearing down in an island with the frontier. And again, through the use of law, we were able to defend our frontier, and actually we gained land. We gained maritime land. So it actually gave us more than what we initially had before starting that debate. So that's why I think we believe in the system, because it has worked in our case, right? So from the global concerns, yes, there is tension, obviously, in the world. And, but I think, so we are very worried of the tension, obviously, in Korea. And that's why we were so active, and we did our token in that. And we take advantage of these conversations to talk about non-proliferation. So this non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction has been a hardcore concern of Costa Rica, because as peaceful as can be, the world starts exploding around us. There's nothing we can do about it. So we are, I would guess, in the global concerns, it would be peace, in the sense of that. With regard to new colonialism, I think we're a little bit outside. I mean, I think it is obviously a concern less strong for the time being than it is for you, because we feel very self-confident of the way we rule our country. I think we're coming more with the mentality of openness, of wanting to do trade. We defend that trade in a way that everything in Costa Rica is consensual in a way. So for example, there are certain instances we haven't joined because our agriculturists are worried that they could be, for example, they could lose to countries that are much more efficient, or that are producing in different ways. So the way we've done is by going on our line. So for example, bananas, we're then learning, we're producing bananas in a much more environmentally that's why I put fair trade in my little comment. I was going to put free trade, but actually I think it is more honest to say Costa Rica is from a fair trade perspective, because our products are more expensive than other countries that could do them very cheaply. But they're more expensive because we are protecting the environment. We're finding ways how to produce banana. So what do we do? For example, the Earth, our university, we have an amazing university. They are producing things. They even use cans and rocks to produce, use the space in a way. They have students who come from Africa, so they can learn how to regenerate the earth, etc. But they are producing bananas and exporting them to Whole Foods. So that was a way, instead of producing a very cheap banana and fighting against, then what we did was upscaled our products. We added that fair trade aspect to it, so we can sell them at a better price, and we can be consequent with what we preach, in a way. So this is an aspect to protect ourselves from the colonialism, is maybe by having our rules clear. And I think I found very admirable the way Singapore, for example, with the Belt Road Initiative, the way Singapore, I was at a presentation listening to one of your ministers, and they were saying, for example, that the Belt Road Initiative sort of sets up the plan that China has to go out there and, talking about what you're asking me, sets the plan. And then what Singapore does is that they welcome it, and then they go a step ahead and propose the plan that suits them. So they say, let's build this relationship with the south of China and Singapore. Then all of a sudden, Singapore is in the driving seat, telling China how they want that relationship to happen, how they want that dialogue to be done. You want to invest, you have the money, you're growing. So how about invest in this way? And this is how Singapore wants it to be done. This is what I hope, this is my personal opinion, this is how I hope Costa Rica will manage the growth of China in the region. I really hope we will put the conditions. I insist, I think we should have had asked for a much better football stadium. We want to put the football stadium, give us the best, and have Costa Ricans working to build it. So I really think this is not the country, this is my very personal opinion, but I believe, I trust on one side our legislation, but it's not that you can do it in a way that you can just outrun a whole series of rights, labor rights, and ways of producing, because I think we have to walk the talk, and we have a reputation to be careful of. So I really think that Costa Rica will honor that. But I hope we do it in an open way, like Singapore, saying, we welcome this, but let's do it in a way that it suits us both, in a proactive way, and not in a defensive way. This is what I'm hoping. This is, in any case, what I think was a good example. This is...
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, I mean, you see, Latin America generally, I think, has been very sensitive to this thing of neocolonialism, because the intellectual basis of structural dependence, the dependencia school, is of Latin American origin. I mean, the whole idea that, you see, these kind of exploitative relationship lead to dependency on the past, the capitalist center. So that has been very Latin American. And also, despite the sort of influence, political influence of the military overall, Latin America, ironically, has made a lot of contribution towards nuclear disarmament. Because what we call the Treaty of
50s, right?
Tlatelolco, for instance. Tlatelolco is
1950, yes.
probably the most successful regional nuclear disarmament.
I was going to mention it, but then I thought.
Tlatelolco. Okay.
But I think your
Yeah.
concern, I really see where your concern comes, because, for example, Panama and China, they're talking about a train that will get all the way to the frontier of Costa Rica. So this is a question that is coming sooner rather than later of the development. And I really hope, for example, the APM terminals, it was huge, the investment they had to make in order to respect that the construction of the port is built in a way that it harms as little as possible the sea environment. So this is an example, but of course we're dealing with Dutch and Danish. It's a bit different. But the port was much more expensive because they had to make sure that the construction was made in a way that it wouldn't harm our environment. Now, we have to see. I really hope that we're not going to close the door either and become protectionist, because I think in that sense, again, having lived 2 years in Singapore, I'm a little bit also influenced and inspired that it's not by hoping things don't change that we're going to really make progress, but I'm hoping to lead that progress. And I really hope we're up to the challenge.
Yes, second round.
I don't need to hop
Yeah.
off the time.
No,
No.
that's...
Even a point which Dr. Chowdhury just mentioned, is that's the intellectual foundations, for want of a better phrase, of the paradigm in Costa Rica. As a backdrop, the dependency school, Andre Golda Frank's thesis of development and land development came out of Latin America, and that informed a lot of the policies that were followed, particularly in the larger countries, the Southern Cone, which eventually resulted in the crisis. And then there were countries that went on various trajectories. And after the overthrow of Salvador Allende, you had Pinochet take Chile to the extreme right, the Chicago kind of a laissez-faire. Before there was moderation and return to democratic norms, you had the PRI in Mexico, which had a very statist approach to development. There is a parallel between South Asia and Latin America in the sense that the import substitution paradigm prevailed. And it's only after the crisis that things started opening up. My question is, obviously, Costa Rica was on a very different trajectory.
Yeah, I still haven't answered your first question, right? How am I going to give you the secret? I'm really not being selfish, but I will really try to go deeper.
What you were reading in your undergraduate days, if there's a textbook which you read in first year economics or development studies in Costa Rica, who are the gurus?
It's interesting. No, I don't really think.
We have the ambassador of Chile here as well. No, I think that's a very interesting question. Maybe you want to jump in.
Yes, it is indeed, of course. In Latin America, we have a different cultures, different, of course, different countries and different immigration currents that went into our lands. We have one good thing, which is the language. From Mexico all the way down to Patagonia, we speak Spanish, except in Brazil. They speak Portuguese, but if we speak Portuñol, you can understand perfectly, and they can understand. We have gone through very different paths, I would say, in history. And we all were conquered and colonized by the Spanish crown, except of Brazil, by the Portuguese. And more or less we gained our independence on the same moment. For some countries like mine was different, as Costa Rica, of course. We need to defeat the Spanish army. And for that, we team up with Argentina, and we formed this liberator army, which defeated the Spanish and went all the way up to Venezuela. The spirit is the same. We believe in the same in the same, I would say, we trust the same symbols, and we follow the same structure in a way of how to organize our countries. We tend to be, in a way, very liberal in a way. Democracy is a must in our countries. That is why Allende regime defeated the conservative line of the presidents that were elected for so many years, only with 30% of the votes. And he had a very, even though he had an ideal, you could be, you could agree or not, but he had an ideal of a country, of developing people, but he couldn't succeed because he couldn't govern. And of course, the political parties team up with the army and brought Pinochet. In this case, Pinochet lead the coup in 1973. But then again, from center left to center right, or far right with Pinochet, we tend to balance in the center, tend to balance in the middle. Our first look into the horizon of our trade and commerce, because we depend so much on trade and commerce, was this region, this vast region of Southeast Asia. And at the beginning of Pinochet time, maybe provoked by the Chicago boys, he organized, all right, we're going to have some embassies to be open in order to gain position, and we really did. And today our main markets are here, are in China, Japan, Korea, Southeast region countries, Indonesia, of course, and India. And we believe in this kind of mutual interest in developing a safe zone, a free zone between the IORA, the Indian Ocean region, and the Pacific institutions like APEC and lately the Pacific Alliance. So we could appear different from Costa Rica, of course, because we had a different beginning as a democracy. In the end, we tend to nurture this, and but our main objective is to have the best relations with this region, even though we have good relations with the North, with the US, Canada. We have free trade agreements with most of the countries. But for us, Asia is the future, of course. And now with the perception of India is going to play in this football game, is going to be a major actor. We should work together with this vast region in order to have the best of the possibilities for everyone. A zone free of conflicts, that would be very difficult, I understand, but free of with disarmament policies and clear capacities for our people. And our main effort should be education. Education is a must. But in our democracies, our countries are very young in a way compared to others. We tend to go to kiri-kanan from left to right all the time. We just had a government central administration central left with Mrs. Bachelet. And now we elected Piñera, which was the former president in the past, center right. But we tend to be, the gross line is not going to be changed. I would.
And James, I think
suggest.
there you touch also a point. I think in Costa Rica we've never had like extreme parties. The parties are fairly, they're not that broadly different. First point. Second point, we've always had very strong, we first had very strong relationships with Europe. France, I think, was really the country we based our legal system on the Napoleonic Code. And we really looked up at France. We had a lot of influence from the great thinkers in France. And that was a period where Costa Rica was really looking up into Europe. Our people were very well educated. They were, I would talk about 30, 40 years ago, it was really a European influence. I am myself very European at heart, and I'm a little bit nostalgic of that. I went to an American school, and this is more like the reality in the last decades. The people studied in the United States, so we've always had a very good relationship with the United States, and I think this is a very important point to have in mind. When you're liked by the United States, when your people study there, and not only that, we have more Americans coming to Costa Rica than Costa Ricans going to the U.S. We speak very well their language. They love our country, so they buy lands and they want to invest. They like the people. They find it very sort of like mellow. So we have always that idea that we do things our way, but we're not going to get into. There is that feeling, I think, of trust that the world, the United Nations. I was talking this in the office, that Costa Rica really has this feeling that if we're in trouble, the United Nations are going to come, all the blue helmets, and are going to defend us. Maybe a little bit in a way, but it's that feeling that if something goes wrong, people are going to help. We also had the Americans trying to invade us, not like 100 years ago, and the Costa Ricans armed themselves, and they defended themselves and kicked Walker out. So we really have our national anthem is very peaceful, but we say if we ever need to, we're going to like defend ourselves. We really have this sense of independence, that we're very proud of being independent, and we're not Puerto Rico, we're Costa Rica, and we always joke in that. But I think having had that strong relationship with the United States in the moment where the people we were very clever in the way we managed that relationship. I think that is a credit, or I mean, maybe not everybody talks it outspokenly, but it's important.
Talking about and by the way, I mean there is this thing which is almost forgotten now, the connections with South Asian politics. When Bangladesh became independent and sought membership of the United Nations, today, I mean China, who is Bangladesh's sort of, what is it called, strategic ally, knocked Bangladesh back on the principle or argument that they were not opposed to Bangladesh per se, but to the singing in a duet of Soviet social imperialism and Indian expansionism. I mean, that is why, okay. Allende, who was hosting the 1972, the UNCTAD conference, invited Bangladesh into UNCTAD first in Santiago de Chile. And that is how Bangladesh established a toehold into the United Nations, and eventually came in 1974. So that's a footnote to what we were discussing. Are there any more questions you want to?
Yeah, last point.
Last point, yes, make it.
I mean, you mentioned about the concern of the country on the protection of the environment, but not many countries share the same concern of you, especially how your country is so concerned about forests and frogs. I mean, countries don't even care about human beings the same way. And on this system of international law with China there, do you think that this system of international law is under threat?
Under the threat?
Under threat, yeah.
Well, I'm sure if we go and look at the real numbers, probably we have less tuna than what we think we have. Well, I think the environment, yes, it is under threat, but I think the world is under threat. I mean, I really think the Paris Agreement is not something to put everybody together to sort of be concerned. I mean, we're really in trouble. The ice is melting, the world is warming up, and there is a real concern. It is a reality. And actually the Paris Agreement, not that I take respect out of the agreement, but it's a very low common denominator, I mean, in a way, right? We need to do much more than the Paris Agreement, and this is a reality. And I feel here, but maybe because I'm not in the right networks, but I don't feel that there is that awareness of that concern. I mean, Singapore is doing their homework, of course. I don't know if you read Cristiana Figueres' article early March, embracing, obviously, welcoming the role that Singapore is doing in the climate action, but also making a call, a very diplomatic call, but it was a strong, for Singapore standards, I think, criticism, saying that the banks have to join the movement, because you had DBS that is about to approve 7 new coal plants in Southeast Asia. So the idea is not only that we do the Paris Agreement and we follow the homework in Singapore, but you also need the banks and the people not to support coal initiatives, because that will obviously lead to more carbon dioxide, but we also need to ideally support economically initiatives in other countries in ASEAN that go in line with that. So yes, of course we're on threat. I think environmentally it's a real threat. It's not, you just have to be sort of hippie and totally green ambientalist to say it. It is a reality, and I think it is of total concern. And I think Costa Rica, we have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of cars. So we need to fight that also, the pollution from the cars. So we have, it's not like we've got 100 in the green. We have a lot to worry. But you also have to see the positive side of the environment. I think Costa Rica we were conservatives. I don't really think we were like super revolutionary protecting the environment. We were more like not destroying it. It was the attitude, like the beach is nice. I remember when buying a piece of land without trees was more expensive than with trees, because you have to cut them. You see? So we were the idiosyncrasy of Costa Rica is a very peaceful, relaxed nature. It's like, don't worry, we can find a solution tomorrow. You know, the heart. This doesn't mean we're not hard workers, but really the spirit, because I think the spirit of a nation says a lot. The people are very I wouldn't say very spiritual, because this is not India. I mean, we honor all the initiatives of Modi promoting yoga in June, and we honor that. And the Solar Alliance, I didn't speak a lot about India, but Solar Alliance that we're doing, I believe in this, and I think Costa Rica has an amazing energy. But the idiosyncrasy of the people is so. I was reading from a former professor of law that I had, that I used to love, who was also our ambassador in Japan. And when we won all these prizes, he says, we were very conservative as in not destroying, really not touching. We're very proud of this. And this has brought a lot of money to the country, because we depend on tourism. So when you teach to the people that if you kill all the turtles, nobody's going to come to the hotels in their village, and nobody's going to come and buy at the restaurant, and the country's going to be affected if they go and destroy the nature. So we raised awareness in that way. So it's more like the people were not destroying much, but it's a benefit for us. So it is a benefit for people to protect the environment. It's not just a problem, but it's like a privilege in a way. And it attracts people, and then if you build the tourism around it and the reputation around it, and people come and see it and you enjoy it, then it's kind of like a positive series of advantages. Does that?
Yeah, thanks. It's very, very impressive.
That is very kind. Thank you. No, I don't think.
Has this created any tension with the Trump administration, for instance?
We haven't had any clashes with Mr. Trump, because I think, well, as you saw about the investments, the companies that you have in Costa Rica, there are so many American companies established there. And we have more Americans in Costa Rica. We have higher levels of literacy.
The emphasis on environment, for instance.
Of environment, no. We're not going to go and grab a fight. We're doing our homework where we need to do it, and we do say, and it's kind of cute, because when you read the position of Costa Rica, we say, we refuse any opening of the treaty, we're against, and we were laughing in the office because it's kind of a little bit outspoken, but that's a way of protecting, right? It's not the United States walks out, it's like we're not touching that treaty, and we're proactive. But no, we haven't had any instance. Many people in the United States support the environment, are really committed, and I think I really think it's a matter of time. But I'm also a stubborn optimist, so don't take my word for the whole country.
I'm going to Pakistan tomorrow, and I had a call from someone in Pakistan who asked me if I could speak on Paris at FC College University. So I said, why? Because in Singapore, the weather doesn't change. And she said, no, the weather doesn't change, but rest assured, the climate is changing. Which I thought was very profound. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you so much.
It was
Thank you.
enormously
Thank you so much.
enjoyable discussion, and we had a lot of takeaways. I shan't sort of go through all of them, but we will continue to relate to you, because we will prepare some kind of a note on this, and then
that's very good.
we'll
Fantastic.
bounce it off you.
Thank
You
you
are
so
all
much.
invited to a cup of tea with us.
Oh, how
but
lovely.
before you go, Ambassador, may I leave you with some
Thank
reading
you.
material?
Thank you so much.
Which will put you to sleep more quickly.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Fantastic.